Hi, I'm Jimmy Luria here at 3A Automotive and Diesel Repair. We get a lot of questions about brake performance and maintenance, and so I'm going to answer a few of those questions here to help you better understand how to keep your vehicle reliable and safe. What maintenance habits help keep my brakes performing at their best? First of all, the brakes should be inspected on every oil change. So if you're having your oil changes done at a repair shop, typically you want to go someplace where they're pulling the wheels off of the vehicle so that they can actually inspect the brakes. Another maintenance item that you want to do is make sure that the components of the brake system are properly lubricated every time you get a brake job done. So when they're replacing the brake pads or the brake shoes, that all the components in there are being properly lubricated. Another point of brake maintenance is the brake fluid. Most people don't understand the brake fluid is very important, that it's changed out about every 2 years or 24,000 miles because it actually absorbs water from the air. And as that fluid absorbs water, it will give you a squishy pedal and it won't be braking as fast as it should because you'll have a little bit of room in the pedal before you're actually engaging the brakes. The other thing that can cause is contamination in the braking system, which can cause all kinds of problems. So you want to change the brake fluid regularly every 2 years to 24,000 miles. You want to make sure that the brakes are inspected every oil change, and you want to make sure that the braking system, all those components that move in the brakes, are actually properly lubricated. How often should I have my brakes inspected to maintain strong braking power? Well, the brakes are going to they're a wear item. So they're going to wear out based on driving habits and the quality of the components and the pads that are put on the vehicle. But you should have your brake system looked at every time you get an oil change. So depending on how often you have to have your oil changes done, every 5 to 10,000 miles, typically it's 5 to 7,000 miles, you should go to a shop where they're actually pulling the tires off of the vehicle and they're inspecting those brake components to make sure that there's not any uneven pad wear inside the brakes, there's no debris in there, that everything's clean. Anything that's showing any signs of improper wear will be caught when they're inspected. So you want to have your brakes inspected about every oil change is a good time frame to have them looked at to make sure you're going to get the maximum wear and the maximum performance. What driving habits help reduce brake wear and improve performance? Well, the first thing you can do is make sure that you're just driving more conservative. When you're accelerating, keep your foot on the gas, and when you need to stop, take your foot off of the gas and put it on the brake. Too many people drive with 2 feet. They have 1 foot on the gas and 1 foot on the brake at the same time, and obviously that's going to engage the brakes while you're driving. It's going to prematurely wear out the brakes. That'll also, if you drive conservatively and you drive with 1 foot, when you take your foot off the gas and put it on the brake, that's going to improve the performance as well. If you're driving more conservative, you're leaving a little more distance between you and the car in front of you, obviously your brakes are going to last a lot longer because you don't have to be slamming on the brakes. And if you're not having your foot on the brake all the time, that's going to make them last a lot longer. How does heat, especially Arizona weather, affect brake performance? The Arizona heat definitely affects brake performance and the brake wear. Because of the intense heat, 110, 100 degree weather, plus the heat from the car being on and running and braking, that creates heat in itself. So brake pads will wear out faster in Arizona than in more cooler climates. It's also going to affect the performance as well because the heat can cause the brake pads to get extremely hot. And sometimes they'll even put a glaze on the pad and on the metal portion, which is called the rotor, and that'll cause squeaking. It'll cause the brakes to not perform the way they should because of that heat. So conservative driving definitely helps that, but also putting top quality parts, the similar quality that the car was manufactured with, will give you the longest lasting brake pads even in extreme Arizona heat. How can I extend the life of my brake pads and rotors? The life of the brake pads and the rotors will be extended mostly by the quality of the brake pads and rotors that are put on the vehicle in the first place. So you want to make sure that whenever you get your brakes done, that they're using high quality parts similar to what was put on there when the car was new. The other thing is driving habits. If you want to extend the life of your brake pads and rotors, you need to drive fairly conservative because if somebody's racing from light to light and you're hitting the brakes really hard and then accelerating, having to hit the brakes really hard, that is going to create more heat and more friction. The more heat, the more friction. You could warp the rotors, which is the metal part of the braking system, and that's where you get the vibration or the shaking when you're actually hitting the brakes. And the pads are going to wear out much faster when you're hitting the brake pad really hard. What role does brake fluid play in overall brake performance? Brake fluid is very important. Most people don't understand that brake fluid actually will absorb water from the air. And the more moisture that the brake fluid accumulates over time, it's just natural, it will, but the more water that it absorbs will make that braking system not perform at its peak. The more moisture that's in the braking system will give you a squishy pedal, and so you won't have brakes that are as responsive as they should be. So regularly maintaining the brake fluid, it should be switched out about every 2 years or 24,000 miles. And in some more moist climates, it needs to be replaced more often. But every 2 years, 24,000 miles, the brake fluid should be changed out so that you get the best performance out of your braking system. It also makes sure that you don't get that moisture in that system and cause early contamination inside of the braking system. How often should brake fluid be flushed for optimal performance? Brake fluid should be flushed. What that means is it's exchanged. All the fluid is flushed out of the system with new fluid in the system every 2 years or 24,000 miles, up to maybe about 30,000 miles. So that is part of the regular maintenance. So probably every 4, 5, or 6 oil changes, you're going to be due for changing out the brake fluid as well. It's not a real expensive service, but it'll give you a much more responsive pedal, because as that brake fluid gets older, it gets moisture in it, and that will give you a squishy pedal, so you won't get as responsive of a brake pedal if your brake fluid is bad. So changing it out every 2 years or 24,000 miles is a safe bet for most makes and models. What type of brake pads offer the best performance for daily driving? The best type of brake pads that'll give you the best performance usually are the same type of brake pad that the car came with originally. Certain makes and models, you can put a more performance pad on there, but traditionally we found that whatever was on there originally is typically going to be the best one. Now that doesn't mean that you need to go to the dealership to get that part. Shops just like ours can put original equipment on there right from the manufacturer, or some of our suppliers supply something that's very similar, almost the exact makeup, and they will last just as long as the original equipment on the vehicle. So typically we like to say, stay with what the car came with, and the brakes will last a long time. Now for best performance, sometimes there's been some alterations, and there are brake pads and components that you can put on that will help solve a problem. Many times the manufacturers don't want to solve the problem, and so another company will come up with a better option. Recently I had a problem with my brakes shaking, and so we went to an upgraded type of pad, which has given me much better performance, and it got rid of the brake shake that I was getting from the original equipment that I had on my truck. How does towing or hauling affect brake performance and maintenance needs? Well, towing and hauling puts more stress on the braking system. So if you're hauling something heavy behind your vehicle, or you're regularly towing something for work, that is going to put a lot more stress on the braking system. All that means is that you want to put really good quality parts on there so that the vehicle has the proper braking power, and also to make sure that it's regularly maintained and inspected. So every time the vehicle's in for an oil change or any type of maintenance, the tires should be pulled off and physically inspected to make sure that there's no premature brake wear, everything's evenly, and if you do that, you're going to get the maximum life. But definitely, if you're hauling something heavy regularly, it's definitely going to lessen the time between brake jobs. Another thing to think about is that if you are hauling something heavy, you definitely want to make sure that you use premium quality braking parts when you have your brakes done. Don't try and go cheap if you're hauling something, because in order for that brake system to perform properly, you want to make sure you have the top quality parts on there and you have somebody who's installing those parts correctly to make sure that thing stops when you need it to. Why is it important to clean or service brake components regularly? Cleaning and servicing your brake system is part of routine maintenance. Typically, when you get an oil change, you're going to have the mechanic pull the tires off and inspect the entire braking system to make sure everything's nice and clean. A lot of times what causes premature brake wear is there's debris stuck in there, and so it just needs to be dusted off and make sure there's no dust and dirt and things like that from just the environment, or if somebody goes off-road on dirt roads, things like that. We want to make sure that that's clean. And then also there's mechanical components in the braking system that we want to make sure that are properly lubricated so everything is moving with ease when you hit the brake pedal. If there's anything hanging up when you hit your brake pedal, that will cause uneven wear of the brakes from right to left or front to back. So making sure that those things are all lubricated properly and making sure they're sliding the way that they should is really important to making sure that you get the maximum life out of your braking system, and also, more importantly, maximum performance so that your car stops when you want it to. How can I tell if my brakes are losing performance over time? Well, the first sign of brake performance lessening is typically when you have to push the brake pedal further to get the car to stop. That might be because the fluid needs to be changed out, or we're starting to get closer and it's time for the pad to be replaced. So you're gonna start feeling it in the pedal. It's gonna be a little squishy. That could be a brake issue. Or if you have to push down a lot farther than normal, it could mean that the pad is getting thin and it's time to replace the pads. Other signs that it's time to get your brakes done are that the brakes start squealing. We get some sort of a glaze between the pad and the rotor. The rotor is the metal rotating part of the braking system. If we get a glaze there, it'll make a real high-pitched, annoying sound. And sometimes you can fix that, but typically it's time to replace the brake pads when you get that glaze. Another sign is that you're starting to feel a grinding. If you get to a point where things are grinding, that's a red flag. Get it into a shop right away, because typically that's where you're getting down close to metal, and that could be a real problem if you have to stop in emergency. So in order to avoid any braking issues, you want to regularly have your brakes inspected when you have your oil change. So if every 3,000 to 5,000 miles it's in a shop and they're pulling the tires off to look at the brakes, they're going to be able to tell you when those brakes are going to be needed, usually within a couple thousand miles of when they'll be needing to be done. So if you need to budget for the brake job, because brake jobs can cost anywhere from $300 to $600, by having them regularly inspected during an oil change, you can prepare for that expense and make sure that you're getting the maximum performance and maximum life out of your brakes. What benefits come from getting regular brake performance checkups? Probably the biggest benefit is that the most important component that you have in your car is your brake system. Because when you need to stop, you need to make sure that that braking system is operating properly. So that's the biggest benefit. It's a safety factor. The most important safety feature you have in your vehicle is your braking system. So we want to stay on top of that for safety reasons, but also by having it checked out every oil change, 3,000 to 5,000 miles, you have it checked out by a professional. They can make sure that there's no debris causing premature wear, and they can also make sure that the braking fluid is properly maintained so that you don't get that squishy pedal. And if you do all of that, then you're going to get the maximum life out of your brakes, but also from a safety standpoint, you're going to be able to stop that vehicle in an emergency when you need to. I hope this video helped answer some of your biggest questions about brake performance and maintenance. If you'd like to schedule an appointment here at 3A Automotive Service, give us a call at 602-997-7978, or you can go online and schedule there. We'll make sure that your braking system is reliable and safe when you need it to be.